Most Americans proudly quote the Constitution, but what if I told you it never said we were equal and counted black people as fractions and legally protected slavery all at the same time? This isn't about conspiracy, it's about the truth. The Constitution was a compromise document, not a moral one. And those compromises created systems that outlive slavery itself. Now, before anybody gets defensive, let's deal with facts, not feelings. What I'm about to show you is an opinion, it's documented history. Now, the very foundation of this nation was built during a time when Native Americans were described as enemies to be removed, and women were not recognized as political participants, and black people were counted, but not as full human beings. And here's what most people miss. The Constitution never had to say white men only because the entire system was built that way. Voting? Well, that was controlled by the states, who restricted it to land-owning white males, and representation boosted by counting enslaved black people as 3/5 of a person. And power? That was concentrated in the hands of those who already had it. So no, this wasn't an accident. It was a structure, a design, a compromise. And if we're going to talk about America honestly, we have to start where it actually started and not where we wish it started.
In his final State of the Union, President Obama was talking about the need in our nation for a new politics. And he said,
"We the people." Our Constitution begins with those three simple words. Words we've come to recognize mean all of the people, not just some.
Now, when I heard that, as a Native man, I had to stop and ask when. I've read our founding documents, I've studied our history, and I had to question, when did we decide as a nation that we the people actually means all the people? Literally 30 lines below the statement, all men are created equal, the Declaration of Independence refers to natives as merciless Indian savages, making it very clear the only reason our founding fathers used this inclusive term, all men, because they had a very narrow definition of who was actually human. Now, a few years later, our founding fathers wrote another document. They started this one with the words, "We the people of the United States." This, of course, is the preamble to the Constitution. However, if you read just a few lines later, down to Article 1, Section 2, section of the Constitution that defines who is and who is not covered by this Constitution, the first thing you will note is it never mentions women. Second, it specifically excludes natives. And third, it counts Africans as 3/5 of a person. So who's left? Well, white landowning men is who could vote. Now, we have to ponder this for a moment. The reason our Constitution was written, the purpose of our Constitution, is to protect the interests of white landowning men. So today, we act shocked that women earn 70 cents to the dollar. This shouldn't shock us. Our Constitution's working. We act surprised that our prisons are filled with people of color. This shouldn't surprise us. Our Constitution's working. We act outraged that in 2010, the Supreme Court sided with Citizens United and rules that corporations now have the same rights to political free speech as individuals. This is what opens the door for super PACs, unlimited contributions to candidates. This shouldn't surprise us. The Constitution's doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's protecting the interests of white landowning men. So this makes our Constitution a systemically white supremacist and sexist document that assumes the white landowning male has the authority to decide who is and who is not human. See, we would rather believe that the United States of America is racist and sexist and white supremacist in spite of our foundation. But the truth is we are white supremacist, racist, and sexist as a nation because of our foundations, and we don't know what to do with that.
All right, class, I'm going to give you 4 more points about the Constitution on how it's for white males. Point number 1, the Constitution never says all men are equal. Now, this one shocks people immediately because that famous line comes from the United States Declaration of Independence, not the Constitution. And the United States Constitution was written primarily to organize power and not guarantee equality. The system was built without equality as a foundation, which allowed slavery to legally exist inside it. Point number 2, the slave trade was protected for 20 years. Article 1, Section 9 says Congress could not ban the importation of slaves until 1808. And that means the Constitution protected the continuation of slavery at the federal level. The system didn't just allow slavery, it guaranteed its expansion for a time. And point number 3, the Fugitive Slave Clause, which meant that runaways had no safety. Article 5, Section 2 says escaped slaves had to be returned even if they reached a free state. Let that sink in. There was no safe state in America for a runaway slave. Freedom could be legally stripped from you anywhere. And number 4, the word slave is never used on purpose. Now, this is subtle and powerful because the Constitution avoids the word slave entirely. Instead, it uses phrases like other persons or persons held to service or labor. So why does this matter? Because many historians believe this was done to preserve the image of liberty while still protecting slavery.
There's an Aboriginal leader named George Erasmus, and he says where common memory is lacking, where people do not share in the same past, there can be no real community. If you want to build community, he says, you have to start by creating a common memory. I think this quote is brilliant, and it gets to the heart of our nation's problem with race, which is we don't have a common memory. We have a white majority that remembers a history, a mythological history of discovery, expansion, exceptionalism, and opportunities. And we have communities of color that have the lived experience of stolen lands, broken treaties, slavery, Jim Crow laws, segregation, boarding schools, ethnic cleansing, genocide, internment camps, mass incarceration, and families separated at our borders. We have no common memory, and I think we all can agree that community on a national level is absolutely in the pits. I'm proposing that the United States of America needs a national dialogue on race, gender, and class. A conversation on par with the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions that took place in South Africa, in Rwanda, and in Canada. If we can acknowledge the vile racism, sexism, colonialism, and white supremacy that our founding fathers embedded deep into our foundations, we might just be able to leave a different legacy for our children's grandchildren's grandchildren's grandchildren. A legacy that for the first time, we the people might actually mean all the people.
So now the question becomes, if the Constitution was built on compromise instead of equality, what does that mean for us today? Does it mean the document is worthless? No, because over time, it was amended, corrected, and challenged. But let's not pretend those corrections weren't necessary. The 13th Amendment had to come because slavery was protected. The 14th Amendment had to come because equality wasn't guaranteed. The 15th Amendment had to come because voting was never meant for everyone. So with that in mind, the Constitution gets tested, challenged, and forced to live up to principles it didn't originally apply to everyone. And that's the real conversation. Not whether America had flaws, but whether we're honest enough to admit them and bold enough to confront what those flaws created, because you can't fix what you refuse to face. And that's the gist of it. We got those who refuse to face it and those who are ignorant to what's going on to call for a fix. With that being said, continue to renew your mind. Enough said.